When my daughter replied to my handwritten letter with, "That never happened," I remember who held me first. I felt something inside me collapse. I had spent years clinging to the memory of cradling her in my arms the day she was born. But to her, I didn't exist in that moment. I was a stranger, trying to insert myself into a story she had already rewritten without me. In the weeks that followed, I dug through boxes of old photos, hospital paperwork, and journals I hadn't touched in decades. I needed to prove to her, and maybe to myself, that I was there, that I mattered. But what I uncovered was far more disturbing than a forgotten memory. Records missing, names altered, a photograph of a child that looked almost, but not quite, like the daughter I raised. And an old nurse who told me something that changed everything. "I remember you holding a baby, sir," but it wasn't her. This isn't just a story about a father desperate to reconnect with his daughter. It's about a man who discovers that the life he's mourned, the love he's longed for, may have never been his to begin with, and that the truth might cost him more than just a relationship. It could cost him his identity. Before we unravel this story of lost blood, stolen memories, and the search for redemption, make sure to stay with me until the end. Because the moment my daughter said, "If you're free, come to dinner tomorrow," everything I thought I knew shattered once again. My name is John Harris, and I'm 62 years old. For the past 8 years, I've lived alone in a small house on the edge of Marlow, a sleepy town where the winters last too long and the neighbors don't ask questions. My days are filled with silence, punctuated only by the creak of floorboards and the occasional song from a radio I leave on so the house doesn't feel quite so empty. After Ellen, my wife, passed away, the silence became more than just absence. It became a kind of punishment I accepted without protest. There's a drawer in my kitchen filled with letters I never sent and a few that I did. Most are addressed to my daughter, Claire. I stopped calling her baby in those letters a long time ago. She's 30 now, has her own life, a job in Portland, probably a boyfriend I've never met. But to me, she's still the small, wide-eyed girl who once called me daddy with the kind of reverence that made every bad day worth enduring. Last fall, I sat down to write a letter that felt different. It wasn't about holidays or regrets. It was about a moment I've clung to for decades. The first time I held her. I remember it vividly. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room casting a sterile glow, the way the nurse swaddled her, and how small she felt in my arms. She didn't cry, just looked up at me like she recognized me from somewhere older than time. I was terrified and in awe, and I whispered, "Hi, Claire, I'm your dad." And I swear to God, she blinked as if she understood. I wrote it all down with as much care as I could manage, my handwriting slow, deliberate. I even included the detail about Ellen laughing because I forgot how to hold her properly and nearly dropped her. That was the day I fell in love for the second time in my life. First with Ellen, then with our daughter. I sealed the letter, walked it to the mailbox at the corner, and stood there for a moment longer than I should have. My fingers hesitated before letting go, as if they already knew what was coming. 2 weeks passed, then 3. No reply. At first, I convinced myself she was busy. Work, friends, life, all good reasons. But after a month, doubt began to settle into my chest, like a weight I couldn't shake. I checked my mailbox daily, though I knew nothing was coming. I refreshed my email like an addict, even though she never used it to contact me. Then one Sunday afternoon, I sat on my porch with a glass of warm lemonade, rereading the copy of the letter I had kept for myself. I couldn't tell if I was proud of it or ashamed, maybe both. It was too raw, too desperate. A man trying to climb back into a moment that no longer belonged to him. It wasn't just about holding her. It was about being remembered. Because that's the thing no one tells you about fatherhood. You don't need to be perfect, but you hope, at the very least, to be remembered kindly, especially if you were absent, not by choice, but by erosion. One missed weekend turned into months, one forgotten recital into a year of silence. Divorce did that, and I let it. Still, I had hoped, foolishly maybe, that the memory of that first moment might still exist in her somewhere, that it might be the key to unlocking something deeper than bitterness. But the silence persisted. On the 30th day, I stopped waiting and started wondering, not just if she remembered, but if it even happened the way I thought it did. Memory is a fragile thing. It can comfort or betray. I started questioning everything, not just that day, but my entire role as a father. Did I matter? Or had I simply imagined a bond that was never there to begin with? The letter sat on my desk, its duplicate mocking me with its neat lines and hopeful tone. I had opened a door I wasn't sure I was brave enough to walk through. And yet, in that moment, alone in the stillness of my living room, I knew I had to. If not for her, then for me. Because even if she never replied, I needed to know I had tried, that I had reached out one last time with the only thing I had left, the truth, and the hope that somewhere, buried deep in her memory, I still existed. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my phone buzzed with her name, Claire. The text preview lit up my screen in gray and white. I hadn't heard from her in over a year, not since she sent a clipped thank you for the birthday card I mailed with a bookstore gift certificate and a short note. Even then, it felt obligatory, like the way you'd thank a distant relative out of politeness. But this message wasn't a thank you. It was a reply to the letter I had sent a month ago, the one I thought might bridge the decades between us. I opened it, heart in my throat. Her message was short, cold. That never happened. I remember who held me first. That was all. I stared at the screen for so long, the text burned itself into my retinas. The words rearranged themselves in my mind, over and over again. That never happened. I remember who held me first. Like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom I hadn't known I was on trial in. The verdict? Fabrication. She was calling me a liar, or worse, delusional. My first instinct was denial. She's joking. She's mistaken. She's trying to be cruel, maybe angry about something else. I reread my letter again, searching for any line she might have misread, anything that could have sounded false or embellished. But no, it was all true. Every word. That memory, that moment in the hospital, was the purest thing I had left. Untouched by the divorce, the custody battles, the silent holidays and birthdays missed. It was before everything fell apart. And now, even that was being taken from me. I didn't reply to her message. What could I have said? I was there. She'd already decided I wasn't. That some other man held her first. Maybe her mother's boyfriend. Maybe Ellen told her a different story entirely. Maybe, in her mind, I wasn't there because I wasn't there enough. I sat in my armchair, staring out the window, watching the bare branches sway against a pale winter sky. My chest tightened, but not from anger, from grief. It felt like I was mourning, someone who wasn't dead, but had chosen to erase me from her story. And maybe she had the right. I hadn't been the father she needed. I missed too many birthdays, too many firsts. Her first steps, her first recital, the first time she scraped her knee, I wasn't there. The court had given Ellen full custody. I had visitation on alternating weekends, which over time became every third weekend, then holidays, then nothing. She stopped answering my calls when she turned 17. I stopped calling when she turned 21. That's the part I hate the most. Not the silence, but how easily we both fell into it. Still, I had held her. I remembered the weight of her, the warmth of her head tucked beneath my chin, the impossible tininess of her fingers wrapping around mine. That was real. It had to be. But her message had shaken something loose. I couldn't stop the questions from flooding in. What if I remembered wrong? What if my brain, desperate for something beautiful, had rewritten the past to make up for the years I missed? What if she was right? What if I was never there at all? I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old photo album I hadn't touched in years. The one Ellen left behind when she moved. Page after page of birthdays and beach trips and pumpkin patches. Photos where I was absent. Always the mother and daughter, never the father. I flipped to the first page. Claire in a hospital bassinet. There was no picture of me holding her. Just Ellen, tired but radiant, holding our daughter like a prize she'd won without me. My hands trembled as I closed the album. I tried to anchor myself in that memory again, to reconstruct it from the pieces I thought I still had. The smell of antiseptic, the click of a nurse's shoes, the way Claire blinked up at me, as if I were the center of her tiny world. But even that started to unravel. Had I imagined the blink? Had it been Ellen who laughed when I nearly dropped her? Or had that story been something I told myself so often it became truth? The line between memory and invention blurred until I couldn't tell which side I stood on. Her message hadn't just denied a moment. It had pulled the thread that held the entire fabric of my fatherhood together. And I was afraid that if I pulled it any further, everything else would come undone. For the next 3 days, I didn't sleep much. I wandered through the house like a man searching for a ghost. Each drawer I opened, each box I dusted off from the attic, became an excavation site, not for physical proof, but for reassurance. Reassurance that I hadn't lost my mind, that my memory of that hospital room wasn't just some story I'd invented to fill in the cracks. I started with the obvious: photo albums. Ellen had taken most of them when she left, but a few old ones remained tucked in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. They were from the early years, back when we still tried to play house, even as the walls quietly crumbled around us. One photo stood out: Ellen sitting in a hospital bed, holding Claire, her face pale but smiling. There was no date scribbled on the back, no hospital name. Just a Polaroid curled at the edges, stuck between pages of an old paperback I'd never finished. I flipped it over, hoping for some kind of note. Nothing. I dug deeper. Medical files, insurance papers, old bills. Most of it was junk, but eventually I found a thin manila folder labeled Claire Birth. My heart raced. Inside were a few faded documents: the hospital discharge summary, a billing statement, and a generic birth certificate copy. But something felt off. The hospital's name, Westfield General, was one I didn't recognize. I had always believed Claire was born at St. Augustine's, the same hospital Ellen and I had toured together during her second trimester. We'd agreed on it. She loved the color of the nursery walls, and I liked that it was close to my office. So why Westfield? I stared at the discharge summary again. It listed Ellen's full name, Claire's birth weight, date of birth, all correct, but no mention of me. Father. Line left blank. I flipped to the billing statement. The charges were listed under Ellen's name, paid in full. No coinsurance, no record of my employer's health plan, which I'd added her to that year, specifically for maternity coverage. Another blank line. I sat back, clutching the papers as if squeezing them would force the truth to leak out. Had I just assumed? Had Ellen gone into labor early, changed hospitals and never told me? Or had I been there, like I remembered, but not as involved as I wanted to believe? The question started to consume me. I opened my old planner from 1993, a relic of a more organized version of myself. The week Claire was born, I had scribbled birthday on the 17th. No time, no details, just the word circled 3 times. Below it, in smaller writing, Ellen called. Not we went to the hospital or held Claire today. Just Ellen called. My stomach turned. Was I even there? Was my memory of holding her built entirely on that one phone call? I wanted to scream, to tear the pages out and set them on fire. Instead, I kept digging. I searched for the camcorder we'd used back then, but it was long gone, probably sold during the divorce. I tried to log into my old email account, long deactivated. I even called St. Augustine's, hoping to verify a birth record, but they had no file for Claire Harris on that date. Westfield, I discovered, had closed down years ago. The deeper I went, the murkier things became, like wading into a lake that looked clear from the surface, only to sink into thick, silty water below. I started replaying that moment again in my head, the one I thought I remembered so clearly, the white lights, the weight in my arms, the blink. Was it a dream? Had I told myself that story so many times that I'd begun to believe it, to need it? What if Ellen never let me in the room? What if the moment I cherished was hers alone, and I'd been given the leftovers, the photos, the summaries, the occasional visit? Worse yet, what if she'd deliberately rewritten the story, not just for Claire, but for me too? The idea lodged itself in my mind and would not let go. What if I hadn't simply forgotten? What if I'd been made to forget, bit by bit, through omission and silence and paperwork that never included me? I sat in my office that night, papers scattered like snow across the floor, Claire's message still glowing on my phone screen. And I realized something terrifying. I didn't know which scared me more, that I had remembered wrong, or that someone had made sure I'd never remember at all. It took me 2 days to work up the nerve to call Ellen. I hadn't spoken to her in almost 5 years, not since Claire's college graduation, when we'd exchanged a few stiff words and long silences across a buffet table. Back then, I told myself I'd moved on, that there was no use rehashing old wounds. But now, with my mind unraveling and memories slipping through the cracks, she was the only one who might still have the missing pieces. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was sharper than I remembered, more clipped. She didn't say, "Hello," just, "Yes." "Ellen, it's John," I said, trying to sound casual, as if this were just a friendly check-in and not an attempt to verify my daughter's existence. There was a pause. Then, "What do you want?" I need to ask you something. About Claire." Another pause. Longer this time. Then a sigh. "What about her?" I didn't know where to start. The letter? The message? The hospital records that didn't match? Instead, I went with something simple, something objective. What hospital was Claire born in? A sharp laugh. Not amused, dismissive. Seriously? Yes, seriously. You don't remember? I thought I did. But the records I have say Westfield General. I was sure it was St. Augustine's. Well, clearly it wasn't. Her voice had taken on that tone I remembered too well. Condescending, impatient. I went into labor early. They rerouted us to Westfield. It's not that complicated. But you never told me. I didn't think it mattered. You showed up late anyway, remember? I don't, I said, honestly. That's why I'm asking. Another silence. I could hear her breathing. Then colder. John, what is this about? Some kind of guilt trip? Trying to relive your glory days as a father? No, I said quickly. It's not that. I sent Claire a letter. About the day she was born. She said it didn't happen. That she remembers someone else holding her first. Ellen didn't respond. I need to know, I pressed. Was I there? A longer pause. You came to the hospital. That's all I remember. You don't remember if I held her? She was crying. The nurses were busy. I don't know who held her first, John. Does it really matter? Yes, I said, louder than I intended. It matters to me. The line went quiet again. Then she exhaled slowly, as if trying to rein in her temper. I was tired, drugged, in pain. Do you want me to apologize for not documenting the minute-by-minute recap of your fatherhood debut? That's not what I'm asking. Well, that's what it sounds like. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to keep my voice steady. Ellen, please, just tell me what you remember. Anything. There was a long beat. Then her voice softened, but not in a comforting way. More like a teacher tolerating a student's foolish question. You came in after she was born, maybe an hour later. You held her, I think. But only for a second. She started crying, and the nurse took her back. That's all I remember. That didn't line up. In my memory, I had been there during the birth. I'd held Claire before the nurse. I remembered her blinking at me, Ellen laughing. But now even Ellen said otherwise. The image I had treasured, clung to, was starting to distort. Was there anyone else there? I asked. What do you mean? I mean, was anyone else holding her before I arrived? Another pause. This one felt different. Just the staff, she said finally. Why? No one else? No friends? Family? I don't think so. Why are you asking this? Because Claire said she remembers who held her first, and it wasn't me. Ellen let out a sharp breath. She was a newborn. She doesn't remember anything. She's just trying to push her buttons. Maybe, I said. Or maybe someone told her a different story. Like who? I don't know. You? The silence that followed was suffocating. Then icily. I'm not having this conversation. You want to rewrite history? Be my guest. But I'm not going to dig up 29-year-old memories to validate your fragile ego. That's not what this is about. It always is with you, John. She hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Her answers hadn't helped. If anything, they deepened the hole. Her tone, her vagueness, the way she kept deflecting. It wasn't just the years that had worn away the details. It felt intentional. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, heart pounding, the dull hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. Something wasn't right. Something hadn't been right for a very long time. And now I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't chasing a memory. I was chasing a lie. The next morning, I drove to the county records office in the neighboring city where Westfield General had once operated. The hospital itself had been shuttered years ago, replaced by a shopping complex and a dental clinic. But I was told the medical archives, what was left of them, had been transferred to the county. I didn't expect much. Hospitals lose paperwork all the time. Files get damaged, mislabeled, or simply disappear. But I had to try. Something in Ellen's voice during our last conversation, vague, cold, defensive, had burrowed into me. She wasn't just forgetful. She was withholding. Inside the records office, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and thick glasses asked for the birth date and mother's full name. I gave her both. She squinted at her screen, then typed something in slowly. "We do have a record," she said, "but it's a scanned file. Hospital closed before we digitized everything properly." She printed out a few pages from a faded microfilm reader and slid them across the counter. The first page looked standard enough. Claire's name, Ellen's information, date and time of birth. No mention of a father. Again, I pointed at the blank line beside Parent 2. "That field was left empty," the woman said, without looking up. "Not unusual back then." I flipped through the next page. Pediatric notes, APGAR scores. Then I saw it. A discharge form, signed by a nurse I didn't recognize, with a scribbled correction across the top, where Harris had been crossed out and replaced with Morris. "Morris?" I asked aloud. The clerk leaned over. "Probably a clerical error. Someone corrected it, see?" "But why was it Harris first?" She shrugged. "Hard to say." I kept flipping. Page 4 was missing. Pages 5 and 6 were duplicates. I asked if they had the original scanned documents, but she shook her head. "What you see is what we have." We get a lot of requests like this. Family history, legal questions. Most people leave disappointed. I thanked her anyway and left with the copies. Back home, I spread the pages out on my dining table and stared at the name Morris. It meant nothing to me. I didn't know any Morris. And yet, there it was, sloppily overwritten in black ink, like someone had made a mistake they didn't want noticed. The more I stared at the papers, the less they made sense. The file looked more like a patchwork than a record, a quilt of mismatched notes and corrected signatures. One page even listed Claire's time of birth at 3:18 p.m., while another placed it at 4:02 p.m. So which was it? I remembered it being mid-afternoon, sunlight streaming through the blinds, but now I questioned even that. I decided to call the last remaining connection I had from that time. Mark Caldwell, a family friend who had worked in the hospital's photo department. He was the one who'd given us the newborn photo of Claire, back when hospitals still offered them printed and framed. "John," he said when he picked up. "Haven't heard your voice in ages." "I need a favor," I said, "from the past." He chuckled. "That sounds ominous." I explained the situation briefly. Mark went quiet when I told him I was looking into Claire's birth records, that something felt wrong. "Do you still have the old files from the photo department?" I asked. "Backups? Anything?" "Well, funny you ask. I kept some negatives and old rolls from Westfield. Didn't want them tossed when the place shut down. I'm not sure if yours are in there, but you can come look if you want." I was at his house within the hour. He brought out a cardboard box full of manila envelopes, each marked by year and department. We sifted through the 1993 batch until we found one labeled September Infant. Inside were about a dozen prints and a handful of negatives. Some were labeled with names, others with room numbers. I spotted a photo immediately that made my breath catch. A man, me, holding a baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket. It was black and white, slightly blurred, but unmistakably me. My younger face, my wedding ring, the way I cradled her with both arms like something precious and unfamiliar. But the baby didn't look like Claire. Not the Claire I knew. This child had a narrower face, smaller eyes, and no trace of the dimple that always appeared on Claire's cheek when she smiled. I stared at it for a long time. My hands trembled as I held it up to the light, as if better illumination might correct the mistake. "Do you remember taking this?" I asked Mark. He squinted. "Yeah, that was your daughter, wasn't it?" I thought so. We said nothing else for a long time. When I finally left, the photo clutched tight in my hand. My mind was spinning. I had held a baby that day. I had proof, but maybe it wasn't the baby I thought it was. And if that were true, if I'd held someone else's child, whose daughter had I loved all these years? I didn't sleep that night. The photo sat on my desk like a loaded weapon, silent, heavy, undeniable. I must have stared at it for hours, trying to see Claire's face in the baby's features. But the more I looked, the less familiar she became. The dimples weren't there. The eyes were too far apart. The chin didn't match. The baby in my arms wasn't Claire, or at least not the Claire I'd watched grow up. By morning, I wasn't just confused. I was scared. The photo wasn't enough. I needed someone else who'd been there. Someone who could remember what I couldn't or wouldn't let myself believe. I dug out a yellowing staff directory Mark had given me years ago when Westfield General shut down. It listed the maternity ward staff from 1993. Most of the names were unfamiliar, but one stood out, E. Donnelly, RN. I remembered her vaguely. Short, silver hair, glasses that always hung on a chain around her neck. She'd been kind to Ellen, I thought. Maybe kind to me, too. It took another half day to track her down. Her name was Edith Donnelly now. She lived in a retirement home just outside Maple Creek. I called the front desk, explained I was researching old hospital records, and asked if she might be willing to speak. The receptionist told me she was still sharp, but didn't get many visitors. When I arrived, she was already sitting on a bench in the courtyard, wrapped in a shawl, her cane resting beside her. "Mr. Harris," she said, standing slowly. "You're older than I remember." I smiled faintly. "It's been a long time." We sat on the bench, the autumn wind brushing dry leaves around our feet. She studied me with a gaze that felt both clinical and maternal. "You said you had questions about the maternity ward?" she asked. "Yes, about a birth. September 17th, 1993. Her eyes didn't waver. "That was a busy month. Flu outbreak. Understaffed. Why are you asking about something from so long ago?" "Because I think something went wrong," I said, and handed her the photo. She took it delicately, squinted. Her eyes widened slightly. "I remember this," she said. "You were nervous. Barely knew how to hold her. Do you remember whose child this was?" She hesitated. "I remember you," she said slowly. "But I don't think she was the Harris baby." A chill passed through me. "What do you mean?" She tapped the photo gently. "This child was born to room 302. You were in room 304, if I'm not mistaken. We had two mothers give birth within an hour that day. I remember because the names were similar. Ellen and Eleanor. It caused confusion. We almost mixed up the wristbands. I felt my stomach drop. So, this baby? Room 302. Eleanor Morris. Morris, I whispered. She nodded. That's right. My mouth went dry. I pulled the birth records from my bag and showed her the discharge page, the one where Harris had been crossed out and replaced with Morris. Her eyes scanned the page. That's my handwriting. I corrected it. Why? Because someone had put the wrong surname on the discharge packet. I noticed it before they handed it to the wrong mother. I could barely breathe. So it was close. Too close. She looked at me, expression solemn. You held a baby that day, but it wasn't Claire. I'm sorry. The bench beneath me felt like it had vanished. My entire body went cold. I held the wrong child, I murmured. You weren't the only one confused. Things were rushed. A nurse handed you the wrong bundle. You didn't notice. First-time fathers rarely do. But I thought... She blinked at me. I talked to her. I swore. She reached over and placed a hand on my arm. I believe you did. But memory's tricky. Sometimes what we remember is what we need to. I couldn't speak. Edith looked down at the photo again. That child, she had a twin, you know. The Morris twins. They were put in separate cribs. I think the labels were switched during the photo session. We tried to correct it, but it stuck. I finished for her. She nodded. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harris. I wish we'd caught it sooner. I stood slowly, legs weak. Thank you, I whispered. She squeezed my hand gently. Be kind to yourself. You loved a child. That matters, even if the beginning was tangled. But that was just it. Had I loved the child I thought I held? Or had I loved the version of that moment I had created? As I walked to my car, the wind harsher now, I clutched the photo tighter. The truth was heavier than I expected. I hadn't just lost a memory. I had lost certainty. And maybe, just maybe, I had loved someone else's daughter all along. I hadn't planned to do it. But after hearing Edith Donnelly's words, you held a baby that day, but it wasn't Claire. I couldn't stop myself. I told myself it was just for clarity, just to put the questions to rest. But deep down, I already knew the answer. I just needed someone, or something, to confirm it. I found the toothbrush in the bathroom cabinet, still in its plastic case from her last visit. She hadn't even unwrapped it. There was a strand of hair on the bristles, almost too light to see. I dropped it into a sterile envelope I'd picked up from a private lab in the city. The same one that promised results in 5 business days. No questions asked. The waiting nearly killed me. Each day was a pendulum swing. Hope and denial battling in 12-hour shifts. In the mornings, I convinced myself it would come back clean. That Edith had remembered wrong, or that babies just look alike, or that paperwork gets messed up, and nothing really matters in the end. By nightfall, I was spiraling, rereading Claire's message. That never happened. I began to wonder if she'd known all along. On the 6th day, the envelope arrived. I opened it at the kitchen table, the same place I'd written that first letter to her. The place where I thought everything might begin again. Instead, it ended there. The words on the page were clear. Clinical, cold, probability of paternity, 0.0% 0. Not low, not unlikely. 0. I stared at the number until my eyes blurred. Then I read it again. 3 times. I ran my fingers down the page like some idiot trying to rub the truth off the paper. 0. I wasn't her father. Not biologically, not legally, not by any measure of science that mattered in a court or a clinic. I let the paper fall to the floor. Everything inside me went quiet. Not in the way you expect. No sobs, no dramatic collapse. Just silence, like someone had turned off the last working light in a power plant that had already been running on fumes. I looked around the room, at the photos on the mantel, at the graduation cap on the bookshelf, at the sweater she'd left behind one Thanksgiving and never asked for. My house had become a museum for a relationship that had never truly existed. And yet, it had. Hadn't it? I'd kissed her bruised knees when she was 5, made her pancakes shaped like animals when she was 7, paid for her braces, her books, her apartment deposit. I'd read her college essays, sent her gas money when she said she was broke, and waited every holiday for the call that rarely came. Wasn't that fatherhood? Did biology get to erase all of that? I found myself walking to the living room, holding the paper like a verdict, and sat in the same armchair I used to read to her from. I remembered her leaning against me, half asleep, asking me to finish just one more chapter. And I did. Every time. Now I realized I had been loving someone else's child all along, but no one had told me. Not Ellen, not Claire, not the doctors, the nurses, the system. They all let me believe. And I did. For 3 decades, I carried that belief like a torch through the darkest moments of my life. And now I didn't know who I was anymore. If Claire wasn't mine, who was I? Just a man who had wandered into someone else's story and decided to stay. I couldn't blame Claire for not remembering. She was right in a way. I wasn't the man who held her first. Not the one she thought she knew. Not even the one she was born to. I was a ghost. A misplaced piece in a puzzle no one had asked me to solve. I picked up the lab report again, folded it neatly, and tucked it into a drawer with the rest of the letters I'd never sent. There was no point in telling her. She already knew. Claire found the photo by accident. She'd been digging through a shoebox of old prints while packing up her apartment. It was an impulsive task, part distraction, part nostalgia, until her fingers landed on a small square Polaroid, half faded, wedged between beach pictures and birthday shots. She paused. The photo showed her at maybe 4 years old, sitting on a park bench next to a man she recognized instantly. Tall, dark hair, square jaw. The man she'd always thought of as her father. The man her mother introduced as Daddy in every bedtime story and holiday memory. But something was off. She looked closer. The timestamp on the back read July 1997. But the date of her birth, at least the one she'd always known, was September 1993. Claire frowned. If she was born in September, she would have been just under 4 in that photo. That wasn't the strange part. It was what lay beyond the numbers. The park didn't look familiar. Neither did the bench, or the man's shirt. Button-down plaid, too crisp for someone she remembered as rarely dressing up. She went back through the box, searching for more clues, more photos, more truths. Another image surfaced. This one from a hospital room. Her mother, holding a newborn baby, smiling at the camera. Claire had seen this one before. It had always made her uncomfortable. The lighting was harsh, almost too sterile. But it wasn't the lighting that struck her now. It was the absence of any father. She flipped the photo over. Nothing was written on the back. She pulled out her birth certificate, tucked in an envelope marked important. Her mother had given it to her years ago when she first applied for college. She examined it now, line by line. Date of birth, September 17th, 1993. Place of birth, St. Augustine's Hospital. Her eyes narrowed. That didn't match what her mother had told her as a child. She'd always said Claire was born during a storm, rushed to Westfield General because the roads were flooded. Claire had repeated that story dozens of times, at school, to friends, in essays. It had become a piece of her personal mythology. She could picture it, rain lashing the windows, her mother braving contractions in the back seat of a car. But the certificate said otherwise. She Googled St. Augustine's, still operational. Westfield had been demolished a decade ago. Why the lie? She called her mother. Ellen picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetie," she said, casual, warm. Too warm. "Mom," Claire said, "where was I born?" There was a pause. "What?" "My birth certificate says St. Augustine's. You always told me it was Westfield." "Oh, that must be a mix-up. I probably just misremembered. You know how long ago that was? I also found a photo. From the park. The one with me and Dad." "Okay. It says July 1997, but I don't remember ever going there. And he looks different. Younger than I thought." Her mother didn't respond. "Mom," Claire said again, more firmly, "did something happen when I was born? Something you haven't told me? Claire, where is this coming from?" "I don't know," she said, though she did. I've been thinking about Dad. I mean, the man I thought was my dad. And things aren't adding up." Ellen sighed, and suddenly the warmth drained from her voice. "I don't know what you're implying, but I've told you everything that matters." "That's the thing," Claire said, quieter now. "I'm starting to wonder if you haven't." There was a silence thick enough to swallow the line between them. Then Ellen said, carefully, "You were born healthy, on time, in a hospital, to a mother who loved you. That's all that matters." Claire didn't argue, but her chest tightened. The voice inside her, the one she had spent years learning to ignore, was louder now, and it was asking questions she wasn't sure she wanted the answers to. Why were there no baby pictures with her father? Why had the hospital changed? Why did every story from her childhood seem more like a script than a memory? And most importantly, if that man wasn't her father, who was? Claire didn't sleep that night. Her mind replayed every lie like a skipping record. Westfield versus St. Augustine's, the empty space on her birth certificate where a father's name should be, the strange familiarity she felt around John Harris, despite barely speaking to him since she was a teenager. She found herself scrolling through old emails, text messages, even an old voicemail from her mother. Each message felt curated, like a carefully crafted narrative designed to keep her safely within the lines. And she had stayed inside them until now. By morning, she had made a decision. She drove to her mother's house unannounced. The driveway was empty, the porch light still on. When Ellen opened the door, her face shifted from surprise to guarded annoyance. "Claire? What's going on?" "I need answers," Claire said, "and I don't want any more soft versions of the truth." Ellen hesitated. "Is this about that man again?" "That man?" Claire repeated. "You mean the one I used to call Dad? Or the one I never got to know because you told me not to?" Ellen stepped aside reluctantly. Claire walked in without waiting for permission. The house smelled like lavender and lemon cleaner. Everything was in its place, immaculate, orderly, sterile, like a museum of a life lived under control. "I found the photo," Claire said. The park, the date doesn't line up. Ellen folded her arms. Claire, we've talked about this. No, Claire said. We've talked around this. You lied about where I was born. You changed hospitals. You said it was Westfield, but my birth certificate says St. Augustine's, and there's no record of you ever being admitted there. I checked. Ellen's lips tightened. Why? Claire asked, her voice shaking. What were you hiding? There was a long silence. Then Ellen walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled. I was 22, she said finally, terrified, alone. Your father, John, had already walked out on me by then. That's not what he remembers. Ellen laughed bitterly. Of course not. Men like him always remember themselves as the ones who tried. Claire said nothing. I found out he was seeing someone else, Ellen continued. A co-worker. Blonde. Pretty. Ambitious. She wasn't even pregnant yet. Claire blinked. What does that have to do with me? I was in labor for 16 hours, Ellen said, her voice flat now. It was chaos at Westfield. 2 other women were giving birth. One of them was her. Claire felt the ground shift beneath her. What? She went into labor early. They put her in the room next to mine. I heard her screaming. Claire's hands went cold. I saw the nurses mix up the ID tags, Ellen said. It was only for a moment, but I saw it. And then I saw the baby. Her baby. She paused. And I thought, why should she get everything? Claire stared at her. You didn't. Ellen didn't deny it. I told the nurse she made a mistake. I told her which baby was mine. And she didn't question me. Claire stumbled back a step, as if the words had struck her physically. You switched me? I saved you, Ellen snapped. You would have grown up in that woman's world, raised by someone who didn't even want children. I gave you love. I gave you everything. You gave me a lie. Claire's voice cracked. Her legs buckled, and she sat down at the edge of the couch. And John, she asked, he was there? That day? Ellen's face softened, but only slightly. He came. Late. Nervous. I handed him the baby you were supposed to be, and he held her like she was made of glass. Claire covered her mouth with both hands. So, I'm not his daughter. No, Ellen said. But you were never hers either. You were mine, and that should be enough. But it wasn't. Not anymore. In that moment, everything unraveled. Claire realized the man who had written to her, the one who remembered holding her, who spoke in quiet, broken words, he had held a baby that wasn't her, but it had been his. Only for a moment. Only once. And then it was stolen. It was a gray afternoon when Claire called John. She didn't ask how he was or ease into the conversation. She simply said, "Can we talk? All 3 of us?" John knew what she meant. He agreed without hesitation, his voice calm, but weighted with something heavy. They met at a small cafe off a back road in the suburbs, neutral ground. Claire sat between them, her arms crossed tightly, eyes flicking from one face to the other. John was early, waiting with a cup of untouched coffee. Ellen arrived late, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast. No one spoke for the first minute. Then John broke the silence. I need to ask one question, he said, looking at Ellen. And I need an honest answer. No dodging, no sarcasm. Ellen nodded slowly. John leaned forward. Did I ever hold my daughter? Ellen didn't flinch. Yes, she said. Claire's eyes widened slightly. John blinked. The one I raised? No. He exhaled hard, eyes falling to the table. Then who was she? Ellen adjusted her sunglasses, removed them. Her eyes were tired. You held your daughter, your real daughter, for maybe 5 minutes. You walked in. I handed her to you. You smiled like the world had stopped. Then the nurse took her back. You never saw her again. Claire covered her mouth. Her breath was shallow. John's voice was low. Why? Ellen looked at him, but there was no apology in her expression. Only history. Because you left me. Because I was 22 and pregnant and terrified. And then I found out you were with someone else. A new life. A better life. I saw her in the hospital that day. Blonde, calm, wearing that smug cardigan like her baby was a trophy. John shook his head slowly. That wasn't, you moved on, she snapped. I saw it in your eyes. You were ready to start fresh with her, weren't you? He didn't answer. So I took something back, Ellen continued. I saw the ID bands get swapped for a moment. I could have said something. I didn't. The babies looked similar. It was easy. John's hands curled into fists on the table. You stole my child. I saved myself from humiliation, she said, voice quiet now. I gave myself something no one could take away. Claire sat frozen. You lied to me my entire life, she whispered. You built everything, on a theft. I built it on love, Ellen said. I loved you more than anything. I protected you. You protected yourself, Claire snapped. You used me. John looked at her, eyes glassy. You're not my daughter. Claire turned to him. No, I'm not, but you tried. You loved me. I did, he said, with everything I had. They both looked at Ellen. You could have told me, John said. You could have let me find her. Ellen swallowed. I thought you'd forget. I thought you'd stop caring. I didn't. His voice cracked. I remembered every year, every birthday, every call you didn't answer. I remembered that moment, holding her, because it was all I had left. Ellen looked down. Her silence said more than any words. John stood, reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper, the DNA results, and set it on the table in front of her. I know the truth now, he said. I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised. Ellen didn't touch the paper. But I want something from you, he added. Not for me, for her. He nodded at Claire. I want you to admit what you did. Say it, out loud. Claire's eyes filled. Ellen hesitated. Then, in a voice barely louder than the clink of a spoon in a nearby cup, I switched the babies. John nodded. Thank you. Claire rose slowly. Her voice was firmer than either of theirs. I'm going to find her, she said. Ellen looked up sharply. Claire! No, you don't get to control this anymore. John said nothing. Claire turned to him. I don't know what you are to me, but I know you love me like a father, and I need to figure out what that means. He didn't smile, just nodded. That's all I ever wanted. Outside, the sky began to clear. The storm, it seemed, was finally over. Claire sat in her car for nearly an hour after the cafe meeting, hands still gripping the wheel even though the engine was off. The windows had fogged over from her breath, from the heat of everything she didn't know how to feel. Her reflection in the rear-view mirror looked foreign, someone older, more hollow, like the truth had aged her in an instant. She had just found out her life was built on a lie. Not a misunderstanding, not a miscommunication, a deliberate, calculated lie. She had been a pawn, placed, moved, and kept in place by her mother for revenge. She had grown up believing she was the daughter of one man, only to learn that the man who remembered holding her first wasn't her father at all. But he had remembered. That detail haunted her. John Harris, the man she'd ignored, doubted, and dismissed for years, had carried a single memory with him like a sacred relic. The day he held a newborn baby and whispered, "I'm your dad." Not because he had to, because he wanted to. She tried to imagine what it must have felt like, walking into that hospital room, already abandoned by the woman he once loved, and still reaching out to hold something fragile and new, and then losing it. Not just that day, but every day after. And all the while, her mother stood silent. Claire's hands trembled. She reached into her bag and pulled out the photo again. The one of John holding the baby. The one who looked slightly off, slightly wrong, but still real in his arms. His eyes were soft in the photo, like he'd found something worth protecting, and he never let go of that moment. She leaned back in her seat and let the truth sink deeper. He wasn't her biological father, but he'd remembered a detail no one else had. Not her mother, not any document, only him. It made her question everything she thought she understood about love, about family, about how blood had been used like currency in her house. This person is family. That one is not. All based on DNA, on names scribbled on a form. But love had never come in paperwork. It had come in the form of a man who wrote letters he never sent, who showed up when no one asked him to, who remembered a blink in a hospital room 3 decades ago, as if it had just happened. And her mother? Her mother had weaponized her, used her as proof of victory in a battle Claire had never asked to be part of. She thought back to the ballet lessons, the parent-teacher conferences, the family vacations. Moments that should have felt warm now looked distorted, like scenes in a play directed for someone else's applause. How many of those moments had been about love? And how many had been about control? Claire felt sick. It wasn't just the loss of identity. It was the betrayal of being used. She wasn't a child in her mother's arms. She was a possession. And now, all those times she'd pushed John away, refused to reply, ignored his messages, rolled her eyes at the mention of his name. They came flooding back with a different kind of shame. He had loved her for no reason other than the fact that he believed she was his. And even after finding out she wasn't, he hadn't recoiled. He hadn't cursed or yelled or demanded anything. He just stood there, quiet, present. Her real father, wherever he was, had never come looking for her. Never asked for pictures, birthdays, updates. But John had kept asking, and now she had to face the weight of that. What did it mean to be a daughter? Was it blood? Was it time? Or was it memory? Claire didn't know anymore, but she knew this. She wasn't going to let someone else define her again. Not Ellen. Not a birth certificate. Not biology. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over John's number, uncertain, afraid. She thought about the right words, about apologizing, about explaining, about rebuilding something neither of them had fully understood until it broke. But instead, she typed something simple, something honest. "If you're free, would you come to dinner tomorrow?" She hit send before she could change her mind. Outside, the clouds began to thin. Light filtered through the windshield, warm and tentative, like forgiveness trying to find its way in. Claire leaned her head against the seat and closed her eyes. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to find out. Claire spent the rest of the evening turning her apartment inside out. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Proof, maybe, or closure. But her hands worked faster than her mind could catch up. Boxes were opened, drawers emptied, closets combed. Finally, she found it wedged between two thick photo albums in the back of her closet. A worn envelope labeled in faded ink. For Claire. From Dad. She had never opened it. It had come in the mail 10 years earlier, during her first year of college. She remembered rolling her eyes when she saw the handwriting. She had been angry then, dismissive. Her mother had told her that John's guilt made him dramatic, that he sent these letters to make himself feel better, not because he truly cared. Claire had believed her. Now, her hands shook as she opened the flap. Inside was a single photo and a short note. The photo stopped her breath. It was black and white, slightly grainy, taken from a slight angle, clearly candid. In it, John held a newborn baby in his arms. The way he looked down at her, it was almost sacred. His eyes weren't just gentle, they were in awe, as though holding her had rewritten his entire understanding of the world. And the baby, small, swaddled, fragile, stared back at him, not crying, not squirming, just looking. Claire traced her finger along the edges of the image. She knew that gaze. She had seen it before. In dreams, maybe. In flickers of moments she had always dismissed as imagination. But now, the moment came, rushing back with force. Not a memory in words, or full scenes, but a feeling. The heat of a body holding her. The soft whisper of a man's voice saying, "Hi, Claire, I'm your dad." The sense that she had been safe, wanted, known. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She read the note next. "Claire, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe you'll throw it away. Maybe you'll laugh at it. That's okay. But I needed to send it because this photo is the only evidence I have that the moment was real. That I didn't imagine the way you looked at me. That I didn't make up the way my heart stopped when I held you. Even if I never hear from you again, please know this. I remember. And I always will. Dad." She pressed the note against her chest. How many times had she told herself he was nothing? How many times had she let someone else's bitterness define her understanding of love? But here it was, in a snapshot, in a sentence, a truth that lived outside of DNA, beyond paternity tests and paperwork. He had remembered a single fleeting moment with such clarity and devotion that it had anchored his entire identity for 30 years, and she had discarded him. Not because he failed her, but because someone else told her he had. Claire wiped her face and stood, the photo still in hand. She looked around the room, suddenly aware of how many parts of her life had been shaped by someone else's story. No more. This moment, this truth, was hers. She walked to the small table near her kitchen window and placed the photo there, right beside the salt lamp and the keys she always lost. She needed to see it every day, to remind herself that the love she had always longed for had been there. Quiet, patient, waiting. The next morning, she didn't cancel dinner. She cooked. She set the table. And when the doorbell rang, she didn't hesitate. John stood in the doorway, unsure. Holding a bottle of wine he clearly didn't know if she liked. He looked smaller somehow, older, worn down, but his eyes still held that same gentleness. She didn't speak. Instead, she held up the photo. His expression broke. He reached for the frame with trembling hands, his fingers grazing the edge. "You kept it," he said, his voice barely audible. "I found it last night," Claire replied. "I remember. Not everything, but enough. That moment, that face, I remember feeling safe. John nodded slowly, eyes glistening. You looked at me like you already knew me. Claire smiled. Maybe I did. They sat down to eat. No grand declarations. No long explanations. Just two people, once bound by a lie, now reunited by a memory powerful enough to survive a lifetime of silence. Love, she realized, didn't always need blood. Sometimes it just needed to be remembered. John sat in his car, outside Claire's apartment, for nearly 15 minutes after dinner, watching the lights from her window flicker behind the curtains. The photo she'd shown him, his arms wrapped around the baby he'd believed was her, was now framed on her kitchen table. That alone had been enough to shatter something inside him, not in pain, but in release. She remembered. She accepted him, even if she wasn't his. But now, a different weight had settled on his chest. Where was the baby he had actually held? Where was his real daughter? That night, he reopened the file from Westfield General. The crumpled papers, the corrections, the duplicate pages. The name Eleanor Morris stood out again. The twin note from Edith Donnelly echoed in his mind. It had been a single moment, a switch, a lie, and someone else out there had lived her whole life with the wrong man. Just like Claire had. He started the search the next morning. The first stop was the county health office. He requested the full records of Eleanor Morris's children from 1993. It took paperwork, ID checks, and the explanation that he was investigating a medical discrepancy from a defunct hospital. After hours of red tape, he finally held a certificate of live birth. Two, in fact. Twin girls, Emily Morris and Anna Morris, born minutes apart, delivered by the same doctor who'd signed Claire's certificate. He followed the address listed on the forms, a suburban neighborhood 2 towns over. The house was modest, with flower beds out front and a yellow mailbox. He sat in the car for a long time, unsure of what he'd say, unsure of what he hoped for. Eventually, he left a letter. Just a note. No names, no claims. Just a request for a conversation, something about a possible hospital record mix-up. He included his phone number and drove away without looking back. 2 days passed before he got the call. A woman's voice, cautious but calm. Mr. Harris? Yes, this is, well, my name is Anna Morris. You left a note at my parents' house. John's throat tightened. Yes, I did. I don't know what this is about, but my mother said you used to be at Westfield General. I was there, he said, the day you were born. Silence. Then, I don't understand. He exhaled, slowly. I'm not sure I do either. But I think there's a chance that you and another baby may have been switched. I have reason to believe you might be my biological daughter. Another silence. Longer this time. Why now? She asked. After all this time? Because I only found out the truth weeks ago, he said, and I've been looking for you ever since. More silence. Then, I'll meet you, but not alone? That's fair, John said. Take your time. She hung up without saying goodbye. John lowered the phone and leaned back into the couch, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't expecting a miracle. He wasn't expecting anything, really, but he had taken the first step. For 30 years, he had grieved a daughter he thought he had. Now, he might finally find the one he'd lost. They met at a public library, quiet and neutral, with no history between them. Anna Morris sat at a corner table by the tall windows, her posture guarded, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. John approached slowly, heart pounding. every step heavier than the last. He had imagined this moment 100 different ways, but none of them felt as still or sterile as this. "Mr. Harris?" she asked, standing halfway. "Yes," he said. "John, please." They sat across from each other. She looked like Ellen in the eyes, but there was something else in her face, too. Something familiar and foreign at the same time. The resemblance was there, yes, but it wasn't enough to make her feel like his. He searched for words. "I appreciate you meeting me," he said. She nodded. "I still don't understand how this happened." "I don't think anyone does. The hospital was chaotic. Records were sloppy. A nurse even told me she saw the tags get mixed up." Anna blinked. "So, you held someone else's baby." He hesitated. "I held you," he said quietly. "Just once." She didn't react. No flicker of recognition, no warmth. "And then what?" she asked. "I raised another girl, Claire. I thought she was mine until a month ago." Anna folded her hands together. "I've had the same parents my whole life. They're good people. They love me. I love them. I'm not here to change that." "Then why are you here?" John looked down at his hands, weathered, trembling slightly. "Because I needed to see you, even if just once, to know that you're real, that I didn't imagine everything." "I don't remember you," she said, and her tone wasn't unkind, just honest. "I know," he replied. There was a long pause. Anna finally took a sip of her tea. "I'm not sure what you want from me." "Nothing," he said. "Not really, I guess I needed to accept that biology doesn't make you a father." She studied him. "Claire, she reached out to me." John's heart skipped. "She did?" "Yes, she told me everything. That she'd always felt something off in the stories our mother told her. That you were the only one who ever remembered her as a baby. That you never gave up." He nodded slowly. "She was the one who saved me in a way." Anna tilted her head. "Do you regret it? Raising someone who wasn't yours?" He didn't hesitate. "No, not for a second." "Even after the truth?" "The truth changed the facts, not the love." For the first time, Anna's face softened. Her eyes dropped to her cup. "I don't know what to do with this. With you." "You don't have to do anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know I exist, and that I care. That's all." Silence fell between them again, but it was a gentler one this time, not avoidance, just space. After a while, Anna stood. "Thank you for being honest." He rose too, unsure if he should offer a handshake, a hug, anything, but she simply nodded, polite, reserved. "Take care, Mr. Harris." "You too," he said. Anna, she walked out the door and into the late afternoon sun. John sat back down, staring at the empty chair across from him. He had found his daughter, but she hadn't found him, and maybe she never would. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same photo Claire had shown him at dinner, the one of him holding a newborn baby, eyes full of wonder. He placed it on the table. That moment had belonged to no one else. Not even time could take it. And that, he realized, was enough.